fine sunny afternoon, and we're just delighted to have you for the Rural Voices seminar series. And as you know, I suppose some of you who join us on a regular basis, the University of Galway run via the Rural Studies Centre runs seminar series on a monthly basis. And we do this in conjunction with the Department of Rural and Community Development. So it really provides a platform, I suppose, in many respects for academics, but also non-academics who may be carrying out a project out on the ground as well. And it's really to disseminate all of the research that's going on, out on the ground, via the universities, via any of the institutes of research. So it's a great avenue to make sure that this research kind of gets out there. And today, we're delighted to kind of have one of our own, I suppose, in many respects. So the title of the presentation today is Strengthening Horizon Europe Proposals through Premier's Multi-Actor Inclusion and Stakeholder Engagement Checklist. So as I said, we're having one of our own here today. So Dr. Shane Conway is managing the Premier project for us in Galway and also carrying out a lot of the research involved in the project. So the Premier project itself is preparing multi-actor projects in a co-creative way. And it's very much in and around looking at the options for Horizon Europe and the engagement of people engaged or attempting to engage in those type of projects. Galway, in relation to the Premier project, well, Shane will tell you a little bit more about, are leading a work package on communication, dissemination and exploitation. And Shane will introduce a lot of that work, and he'll also introduce the multi-actor inclusion and engagement checklist, which has been developed as well via the project over the last number of months. So I'm going to hand it over to Shane to explain the rest of the project and our work in it in relation to Galway as well. Thank you, Shane.
Thanks. Thanks, Maura, for the introduction. And for once, our Rural Voices background reflects the real situation outside. So normally it's dark and very dreary here. So I'll just share my screen.
No, much nicer day today out there. So thanks everybody for joining us. We're delighted to have you.
Okay, can you see this? You can see this?
Just needs to, yeah, it's in presentation mode.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so thanks for the introduction, Maura. And she provided an overview of my role on this project within the Rural Studies Centre here. And just to acknowledge that the Department of Rural and Community Development are supporting us on this, and they have done so from the very start. So we really appreciate that. Whilst the presentation today is on this Premier Multi-Actor Inclusion Stakeholder Engagement Checklist, I need to build a picture around this, set the scene as just to make it as applicable and relatable as possible. So towards maybe a third of the presentation in, we'll delve into this, but to set the scene, it's very important to give a background, because the audience for Rural Voices is those across policy, research and practice. So we try to tailor a message to each and to make it as engaging as possible. So for those of you, a lot of you are familiar with Horizon Europe, but for those of you who aren't, it's the main flagship funding program to support research and innovation in the EU, and it runs from 2021. This is the Horizon Europe to 2027. Prior to that was Horizon 2020, and this is the budget. A massive amount of money, but this is across disciplines from medicine to AI, etc. So within Cluster 6, which is our focus for rural and for agriculture and food and forestry, natural resources, we're Cluster 6. So it's all about the sustainable management of such resources. And broadly speaking, again, this is synopsized, but these are the cluster areas. And whilst there's text, quite a lot of text perhaps on some of the slides, it'll just help the flow of it. I'm not going to read it word for word, but even when it's shared afterwards, we can, it'll just help. So that's just a reference related to the text within. I won't read everything, but you can refer to it as I'm going along. Sorry, this is stuck course. Oh, sorry. So just in relation to, before we get going as well with this, it's hot off the shelf essentially with this pre-publication of the Horizon Europe Cluster 6. So when I speak about this is what has been the structure, but actually only was it last week that the pre-publication of the different project types, the calls to be announced, have been announced. And now we know what kind of topics are there within the broader topic. So, and the main final program will be in May 2025. So essentially, this presentation is actually well in line with what's happening right now. So that's just a piece of information, and there is a link to that for again, but just so you know. This multi-actor approach, this is the key terminology. And even yesterday, I'd write a piece for the Austrian National Rural Network, and they were calling it multi-stakeholder approach. And for the purposes of keeping everything in line with the language of the European Commission, it's important to keep, I suppose, drilling home that this is the language that must be used in such applications. In a way, and I will delve into this a bit deeper in a moment, but it's a little bit I won't say wishy-washy, but there's a lot of variations of the multi-actor approach floating around, be it through academic publications or even policy documents, slight shifts in wording, etc. But through Premier, we try to come up with a one-liner as comprehensive as possible, but trying to have all the different elements. So it is a collaborative and inclusive process. And it brings together this balanced mix of, they're called AKIS actors. So essentially AKIS, Agriculture Knowledge Innovation Systems, is the ecosystem of agriculture and forestry and rural businesses. Even though it's not explicitly said, again, terminology gets a little bit confused, but essentially AKIS is this ecosystem of rural life, be it policy, research, practice. And the ambition here from the multi-actor approach is to co-create practical, demand-driven solutions that are relevant, widely shared, and importantly, ready for real-world application. So that's essentially what the multi-actor approach is. And importantly, when you draw it back to Horizon Europe Cluster 6, the space that I presume we're all in on this call as we're interested in this topic, 40% of the projects will ask for this within the application. So this multi-actor approach, which I'm going to speak about, is a fundamental pillar that has to be included within. And why does it matter? This authentic involvement of AKIS actors across this policy, research, and practice will boost the relevance, adaptation, and adoption, and long-term societal impact of project outcomes amongst users. It has been referred to as end users, but actually users is a more appropriate term. The current challenges, however, and this is I suppose has been very prevalent, but even now, a lot of proposals are failing to implement it meaningfully. It's very easy to have tokenistic engagement, but we need true co-creation here. There's an over-reliance as well on this narrow group of familiar experts, the go-tos essentially, that regurgitate a lot of the same sort of messages. We experience it ourselves. Different projects might be trying to go along with the similar lines, but given it a different title, etc., etc. So this limits diversity and weakens co-creation and reduces the real-world relevance and uptake of these innovations. So that's a challenge when we're talking about the multi-actor approach. And indeed, when you look at the academic research on this topic, in the last Horizon program, research found that the insufficient attention was given to this tacit or more local regional knowledge. And as well as that, this working together co-creatively along the project, all along, not just at the end, but even at the start, bringing in that more regional local knowledge. So that's something that has been raised in academic research, and it's up to these projects to draw from this and to learn from this. I suppose this presentation isn't about EIP Agri operational groups, but I know that some of you on the call are involved in them and have been. And operational groups bring together, just like Horizon Europe's multi-actor approach, bring together these different types of knowledge to co-create innovative solutions to real-world challenges and opportunities in the agri-food and rural economy. So to try and remove this silo mentality. And I just think it's worth taking inspiration from the success of these projects, particularly in Ireland, for example, under the last Rural Development Programme. You know, you had 57 projects out there that were largely successful because in most cases they were co-developed by the researchers, advisors, agribusinesses, and the farmers centrally involved. So it was more about knowledge sharing rather than this notion of knowledge transfer, which I personally don't agree with. It needs to be shared from the bottom up to the top down to really make a difference. You know, we even saw the Cuave New Aran project in the Aran Islands. Farmers were making decisions on a field by field basis. You'd never have that with projects that are top down because they just wouldn't understand. So just a little bit of inspiration that should be taken from this when we're talking about the multi-actor approach. And we have, in our previous work, Maura and I, we've developed booklets around this, so just of reference. So Maura has given a very, you know, comprehensive, but overview of Premier, but there's a few aspects maybe that I can provide more detail on here. So what it's all about is to strengthen this multi-actor approach that I've just referred to. And Premier aims to do so. The specific focus of Premier is to support the development of more relevant, coherent, and well-prepared Horizon Europe project proposals. So once you're starting off in this Horizon Europe journey, how to even devise the proposal, how to really figure out how to thread the multi-actor approach throughout. So by doing so, it contributes to more effective programming and implementation of the multi-actor approach. And Premier aims to do so and is doing so through these practical co-creative tools and services for AKIS actors like yourselves who are preparing these proposals. You know, this support is for newcomers engaging in the multi-actor development proposal for the first time, also for experienced proposal writers and project partners who may be, you know, some of them might be a bit stuck in their ways in the sense that they mightn't have thought about certain things, but by bringing maybe even such a talk today to the fore and to kind of challenge some preconceived ideas of what the multi-actor approach is, it might just stimulate some increased interest and bring to light something that someone might not have heard about before. And also there's service providers out there now who are assisting in proposal preparation. So such tools will help them as well. You know, when we talk about Premier, in the project type, it's a coordination and support action. So essentially, we're not developing new research around this, but of course, when we're working at university, Maura and I and Louise, that's a big focus as well. So we are delving into that somewhat, but predominantly it's about supporting actions. 15 diverse organizations, so it is a multi-actor project in itself. We have everything from the University of Galway to a local action group, a LAG in Estonia, for example. So we're really diverse across 12 member states. Eberswald University in Germany are the coordinator. Duration from January 2023 to 27 December. Approximately €5 million budget. As you can see, that's all there. Just to give you some overview of the scale of the project, I suppose, and the European-wide reach. Internally, we lead work package 1. So it's the connection, the communication, the dissemination, the constant dialogue. And I suppose, you know, we were approached to take this on because of our success previously with Ireland's National Rural Network, where we were the lead researchers involved with the EIP Agri leader aspects of that, and you know, it was very successful. So I suppose we were recognized as leaders in this space, and we were able to scale up to a European project in this context, in this situation. So it's, you know, the building blocks were there, and now we're leading this aspect of the project. You know, as you can see from the map, spread out across Europe from Romania to Estonia to Ireland. So we have quite a large reach, but that brings its own challenges that you actually, when we're over the communication and outreach and connection work package, is to try and keep all this ticking along and trying to reach everyone out there across policy, research and practice that wants to write a Horizon Europe proposal. And also we're trying to communicate all the outputs from the project to all. So, there's challenges, but that's the nature of it. This is a map, an interactive map we've developed for the website, just as an example. Also, it's worth noting, I won't go into this in big detail, but the European Commission funds sister projects to enhance this co-innovation and across AKIS in this space that I'm speaking about. Premier is looking at it about specifically supporting the multi-actor approach in proposals, but there's other ones looking at more about, say, advisors, bringing in advisors, the multi-actor approach, bringing awareness essentially to more specific audiences. The EU Farm Book then is to host platforms around previous projects to have a one-stop shop essentially. So really, I just brought this to the fore because we do have a joint newsletter that we have with those projects. So essentially, there's a joined up approach here. Much like with the other project that we're leading, the Falera project, there are sister projects for that as well. And even with Falera, it's very deeply embedded in this project as well, because not just because there's mutual partners, but because there's a connection between them. I won't have time to go into it now, but there is. So I did point out the challenges of trying to engage all these stakeholders across Europe. Internally, of course, in the project, we have a lot of stakeholders, a lot of actors, but even outside that, to communicate outwards, where to start, how to go about this. And, one of our deliverables was for the first 6 months of the project. And, at the time it was pretty demanding because you had to look at that big ecosystem, that AKIS ecosystem that I spoke about, and try and break it down into who's part of it, I suppose. It was quite vague, and it still is to some degree. A lot of fragmented research, etc. But in relation to the deliverables, we approached it through this way. And this way was to connect the multi-actor approach to strategic management literature. And I think that's where the university hat was put on, in the sense of we may not have been a research project, but we had to break this down because there was a lot of ideas around the multi-actor approach, a lot of fragmented definitions about how to go about it, but fragment it. So from the perspective of strategic management literature, something that, I can't say that I'm an absolute expert in it, but a lot of the research I did for my PhD back from 2013, 2017 was around family farm literature and how to apply that to family farm literature in relation to the older generation and that concept of stepping aside. So previously I've had experience about utilizing literature from the more corporate side, but applying it in the agricultural realm. So I suppose I took some inspiration from that in relation to this. So when you talk about stakeholder engagement within this literature, it's a cornerstone of corporate social responsibility, and it's essential for effective decision-making and accountability. Widely cited. Genuine engagement demands continuous collaboration, shared power, and mutual respect amongst diverse actors. Again, this is coming from the corporate world. Strategic management evidence shows that co-creation across sectors produces more sustainable, tangible, and viable solutions than isolated efforts. Again, this isn't even taken into account AKIS. It's not taken into account previously around this farm, agriculture, forestry, food production space. So, whilst there's a very strong model in existence in this more strategic management side, an equivalent around AKIS, the framework, the ecosystem framework for agriculture, forestry, and related sectors was largely absent until now. So, because AKIS, as I mentioned, this ecosystem is so central, a ticking clock that everything works together, is now central to sustainable knowledge integration, innovation support within these sectors. And this was cited in literature. This gap was a major concern. So, from the first, back in January 2023, for the first 6 months of the project, we really focused on this and tried to ensure that Premier's approach as a supporting action brings this really established literature to the fore, and bring it into agriculture, forestry, and related sectors, apply it in order to try and strengthen this multi-actor inclusion and stakeholder engagement in Horizon Europe projects. And of course, related instruments such as EIP operational groups, because they also apply the multi-actor approach, so they can also draw from this as a source of inspiration. I won't go into it all, but essentially, this strategy that we developed was a 5-step strategy towards engagement within the project, not about, say, projects that are looking towards preparing a proposal, but how we could go about mapping, categorizing, engaging with, and then communicating with all these different actors across policy, research and practice and stakeholders in these sectors. A mammoth task it was, but by having partners across Europe, it was possible. And we had a very comprehensive mapping of stakeholders across Europe. Subsequently, across the work packages, we're able to categorize them and we were able to move forward. I suppose that the big central aspect that I wanted to bring to fore here is that this quadruple helix model of innovation is well established in strategic management literature. And essentially, it's one model that encapsulates the multi-actor approach in the sense of, if elements of projects can include these different actors, the ethos of this model, they're onto a winner essentially. And I'll apply it in practice later. But I don't need to read out what it incorporates, but those are the 4 key elements. It promotes multi-directional collaboration between traditional top-down knowledge transfer and bottom-up, embeds a real societal needs and relevance and values into co-creative innovations and solutions, and includes everyone, not just a few. And I suppose from an Irish perspective, this was the model. And then from that, we broke it down and we were able to model the stakeholder mapping from this model and try and include the stakeholders across Europe within that apply to multi-actor approach and apply to AKIS ecosystem. Again, there's a lot of words and terminology, but there was a logic to it, a structure towards something that was quite a mammoth task, I must say. And by doing so, we were able to utilize the database then for subsequent activities, such as these macro-regional stakeholder panels that we held part of the project. I won't go into it in detail, but we were able to capture people across those different helixes. That fundamental multi-actor testimonial was possible through this. They're just an example of people that spoke. We were able to capture messages. And then subsequently, from the lessons learned and from the paper itself, I published, along with Maura and Louise, published a paper in Open Research Europe on this strategy. So it gave it extra legitimacy because, in a sense, we were starting at a low base in the sense of this stakeholder engagement. We were asked to do it as part of the project, but our belief was that without some sort of academically grounded strategy or something to back it up, that you were just pulling names out of the sky, essentially, who's who. But by having a strategy behind it, backed up by strategic management literature, we could move forward with confidence. And it did gain a lot of attention from Slovenia to Italy to across Europe. Different organizations picked up on it and wanted to utilize it. However, I suppose from the perspective of what Premier is trying to achieve in relation to proposal development, we need to take a step back, because the engagement strategy that we developed was for an ongoing project. So we had to adapt it. So we evolved the strategy into a checklist. And as you can see, these are the 2 elements. It was about evolving them. There was nothing new. We didn't reinvent the wheel. But why did we do it? So I explained why it was developed from a Premier context. And while it was valuable for project implementation, feedback from everyone in the project highlighted that its structure was less suited to the needs of proposal development teams, which the project is predominantly addressing. Proposal writers at an earlier stage benefit from concise, adaptable tools that support early stage design and co-creative efforts, such as a checklist. And this is from the outset through to the submission. So the logic behind evolving it, I suppose this slide synopsizes why we did so. A little bit, I'm not going to read all this, but there is confusion in a lot of cases around actors versus stakeholders in these Horizon Europe projects, and indeed with EIP operational groups. An actor is essentially internal, who takes part in the project activities, whereas a stakeholder offers vital contextual insights. I won't read all this, but essentially the checklist will help identify, engage, and collaborate with both internal actors who are actively shaping the proposal and external stakeholders who offer these vital contextual insights. So there is that consideration, and the language is often, the terminology for both are often mixed up. So again, as an overview, this checklist is a practical and reflective tool to support the meaningful integration of the multi-actor approach in the Horizon Europe proposals. These are the 5 elements to the right. I will go into them in detail in a moment, but it's step-by-step guidance towards this inclusive collaboration engagement across all proposal stages. And importantly, and this is something that I really want to try and drive home, is that it moves proposals beyond formal compliance that they must include it towards embracing the core principles of the multi-actor approach. And also, very importantly, as I mentioned at the start, to reduce this over-reliance on these so-called experts. And they are experts. I give credit. They're bringing in millions, but this can enhance the knowledge base of people who are getting into this space, who may be in partners in the past, but are going to take that next level, even for, say, EIP operational groups. The lead partner, for example, they were driving it, and now they're like, okay, I'm better positioned now. I understand the multi-actor approach. Through such a checklist, I can enhance my knowledge base and maybe become a partner in a Horizon Europe project, see what I can bring to the table, for example. These are the 5, you've already seen these, but I just said I'd illuminate them this way. But these are the 5 that I will now approach and explain. And I suppose just to remind you that this is all underpinned by Premier's peer-reviewed academic publication, Open Research Europe, which connects strategic management literature theory to EU policy directions with practical multi-actor approach implementation. So whilst it's innovative, but it's also backed up by research. And that's important to remember, because there are a lot of attempts to bring the multi-actor approach to the fore and in real life settings. But if it's not backed up by some sort of strategy, I would question it. And that's why, particularly this point, I suppose this is probably the most important slide. A lot of text here again, but I'll synopsize it. But we're in a different era. We're even in a different era now than when we developed this 5-step stakeholder engagement strategy in January 2023. ChatGPT, etc., pretty much wasn't in existence when we developed the initial strategy. Essentially, it's a valuable tool now. AI, it's helping. It can streamline proposal development, but in order to safeguard the human, the participatory, and the relational elements of Horizon Europe projects moving forward, we need to safeguard it more than ever. The aspects of the human side of this, because they're becoming more common AI, but there are human elements that the multi-actor approach is the core ethos that can't be forgotten about. So with 40% of the Horizon Europe projects calling for this, as I mentioned before, this multi-actor approach, this checklist is intended to ensure that critical components are not overlooked. by AI programs. It can do a lot, but it can't do everything. So hopefully this is a tool that will help. And if you can integrate the resource, the checklist into your proposal preparation process, with the help of AI, I'm not disregarding it whatsoever, you can strengthen both the quality and credibility of your application, even if you have used it to develop it, by using this checklist to cross-reference that artificially intelligent text generated, whatever way you want to term it. But by using the checklist, you can ensure that you can make your project as inclusive and impactful as it is innovative. And just to protect that more kind of a human element. So by bringing it to life, I want to be able to now demonstrate how Premier's 5 key checklist elements can strengthen and horizon your proposal. My method that I've decided today, and for those of you who know me, they'll know why I've chosen this topic. For those of you who don't, a quick Google search will solve that curiosity. But I'm going to look at this, looking at the sheep sector, and a call like this will have different elements. This is looking at the genetic improvement of the organic sheep sector in upland regions across Europe. A lot of elements to take into account there, but essentially it's about organic sheep farming in upland areas across the European Union to enhance it, its viability, its sustainability. So by using the checklist for this hypothetical call, and this is completely hypothetical, hopefully it'll just make a little bit more sense. Translate it into a real world practice using a practical example. Hopefully this will make it easier to use and apply and promote this inclusivity and co-creation lasting impact. So I'll start with the designing a well-balanced multi-actor project consortium. So this checklist, have you built an EU-wide consortium across the quadruple helix model of innovation that I previously mentioned? Is there actors within from policy, research, industry, society, community? And is it aligned to the call objectives? Is it prioritizing diverse perspectives and assigning meaningful roles to underrepresented groups in knowledge sharing? Again, I'm just citing some strategic management literature at the bottom just to kind of back up the message here that this is already called for, but now we're trying to apply it for agriculture, forestry, and related sectors. It's time to align, because farming, forestry, related sectors are strategic businesses. So it's time to start applying this within, just to build our knowledge base, to have confidence in this message. Again, can't go into it all, but for the perspective of a project that's looking into this across the sheep sector, in government policy, there's organic certification bodies. In science, there's livestock genetic labs, agroecology institutes, industry, livestock tech startups, organic breeding, small, medium-sized enterprises, science community, a lot of sheep breed societies, upland farming cooperatives, LAGs. These can be part of this well-balanced consortium across this quadruple helix model. In practice, then, prioritize these underrepresented actors. Give the rare breed societies a voice in the project. Give them a task, give them a role, even if it's an on-farm demonstration, for example. Ensure that the partners are feeding into the design phase, that the researchers just go, here's the project, please apply it. Let them be challenged by the more underrepresented actors. Value the farming knowledge equally with academic expertise to help co-create viable breeding solutions, for example, for these different sheep breeds. Hold innovation workshops and farmer panels across upland regions. So essentially, it doesn't capture everything, but it's just to give you a flavor of how the checklist could be applied to a project and just to think about, are we reflecting on this enough in practice? The next one, ensuring genuine multi-actor knowledge sharing. Are we fostering structured multi-directional knowledge exchange, sharing throughout the project? Is it through living labs or multi-actor stakeholder discussion groups? are we integrating the practitioners' tacit knowledge, i.e. their local or regional knowledge, and the needs of the external stakeholders into the project design from the outset? Or is this an afterthought? But it should be in the proposal development stage. And this is all about proposal development. Again, backed up by previous strategic literature, going back over nearly 30 years, this has been the message that they've been trying to bring to the fore, and now it's time to adopt it. Meaningful involvement, boost co-ownership, long-term project sustainability, end users' needs, apply project results in practice. Again, when we look at this hypothetical sheep farming sector in the uplands region, farmers' experiential knowledge is recognized as central to genetic innovation, experiential, excuse me. Real-world perspectives beyond lab-developed models. Mutual learning builds trust. There'll be a lot more adaptation of the results if there was more farmer organizations, for example, involved than just, say, a research-driven. In practice, living labs. And importantly for Horizon Europe project, trial these breeding strategies on organic farms in Ireland, Spain, and Romania, for example. Different geographic regions, see, is there any common lessons to be learned, for example. Facilitate ongoing engagement between the different actors involved in the multi-stakeholder panels, for example, or discussion groups, bringing the people together to challenge each other. There's nothing wrong with being challenged on your thoughts and ideas, and critical analysis isn't done enough. And it's AI is even limiting it even further. So by bringing people together and opening up dialogue, that's going to be very important. And projects should be embedding this again into the proposals. So facilitating fair participation, very important, because there needs to be fair power sharing amongst all actor groups and avoid this dominance by a single entity. And that's, we all have experienced that. But by trying to, again, use this kind of a guideline within your proposal phase, that this is how you're going to address this, by bringing the diverse viewpoints, you'll inevitably and ultimately bring across a shared ownership of project outcomes, that people know that they've had fair participation in the decision making. Again, I'm not going to refer to it in full, but a lot of literature again refers to this, that proactive dialogue is needed to maintain top-down and bottom-up. There has been warning against ad hoc engagement that will empower some actors but marginalize others. So there needs to be a focus on making sure we don't discriminate against the so-called weaker stakeholders, i.e. the less representative. They mightn't just have the same power or authority or financial backing, for example, but it's important that their voice still comes to the fore. And why is it important? Because the European Commission are calling for this under the multi-actor approach. These projects are massive, the Horizon Europe project, so it needs to encapsulate the core ethos. So within a project, again, sheep farming, uplands across Europe, academic institutions traditionally are strong, but if you can avoid the dominance by bringing a shared decision-making, transparency, and inclusion across all partners, this co-governance board could be a way to do so, bringing together representatives from farmer groups. And there is crossovers, of course, with what I've about the second point, but it's just to kind of show that there can be, in practice, how it can come to fruition. Build regular feedback loops, be it through regional farm organization panels to inform steering decisions, and empower marginalized voices, such as, say, upland farmer groups in remote areas, or younger sheep farm producers or younger farmer organizations, to contribute to the planning and evaluation. So again, this isn't capturing everyone, but just to kind of think about it a little bit more, about the type of, in practice, how you can make it work. Very importantly, embedding gender equality, be it you're a man or a woman or whatever way you identify, and also inclusive practices across geographic, etc. So a gender sensitive engagement strategy will ensure equitable and diverse participation across all identities. Also, when we're talking about inclusive practices, address cultural, geographic, and linguistic barriers proactively. And that's why, for example, I used the example earlier about if you were to hold demonstration farms in Ireland, would have them in Spain as well, Romania, different geographic areas, different farming types, but essentially you're still talking about organic sheep on upland regions in the European Union. This is about trying to address these barriers that might have been in the past by bringing everyone together and through mutual learnings. The EU SCAR AKIS has looked into this, and now they're talking about embedding such social innovation and inclusiveness into AKIS strategies. So yeah, it's something just to consider, that we're all parts of the European Union, and what makes the European Union so wonderful is our diversity. But when you're talking about common projects then that we're all involved in, there are challenges. There ultimately will be challenges. But if you can try and embed inclusive practices, hopefully it'll make the process a bit more streamlined. You know, there is a Horizon Europe gender equality strategy. Draw from that. Increase diversity and innovation potential across the rural upland regions of Europe. You know, promote the visibility and leadership of women and other minority actors, traditionally, say, in the agricultural sector or the organic farming sector. Set gender balance then when you're developing a project consortium, when you're recruiting. Support female-led sheep cooperatives, agri-advisory enterprises, upland researchers. So looking at the socio-economic side of upland regions, they exist. I know some of them, and their knowledge in such projects would be invaluable, but they might be a little bit forgotten about. And also disseminate success stories of women in agriculture involved in genetics for sheep farming, for example, and engage stakeholders from linguistically and geographically diverse upland areas. So I suppose through AI, the production of material now in different languages is easier, so it can contribute, but ensure that it's not just all in English. We're to remember in a lot of cases that Ireland are the only native English-speaking country left in the European Union. That has so many benefits for us, but also we must always take that into account. And of course, all our partners on the project, we all conduct everything through English. But when you look at the broader stakeholders, yes, there may be some stakeholders out there that it might not be as strong, but we want to get this message across. So it's important to have in the native language of the various member states as well. That's something that, and again, this just follows into this aspect of dissemination, demonstrating dissemination exploitation plans, demonstrating this co-creation. So we try and ensure that the dissemination exploitation strategies are engaging with all actors, not just research partners, that outputs are not just targeting research partners. And to do so through advisory systems, policy instruments, and business models that try to have a lasting impact, and importantly, demonstrate this project's return on investment. There's European taxpayers' money being spent on these projects to try and make a difference to society. In this context, to organic sheep farming in the upland regions, which will have a knock-on impact for, say, food production, but also on the sustainability of these upland regions, with the knock-on impact of, if the upland regions are looked after, say, even in an Irish context, it has a knock-on impact to the tourism industry. People want to see an active landscape that's alive. And just for example, so if we can capture the different audiences, we can demonstrate the project's return on investment. Again, I'm not going to go into it all in massive detail, but for the purposes of this, just move beyond passive dissemination to co-created uptake strategies, the end user adoption and policy integration. And this hopefully will build long-term legacy beyond the project's life cycle. So by bringing, say, the lags, for example, in an Irish context, have a great reach. Organic certificate networks, upland farmer groups, essentially try and get the message across the different platforms. appoint, say, farmer or cooperative ambassadors to share project benefits across rural communities. Trusted networks are out there as well. Even regional media, the farming media, very trusted sources of information, and hopefully outputs from the project can be communicated through such. And if you can incorporate that sort of a thinking or ethos in your proposal, you're showing that you're thinking about the next step. So the project is ended. How can you ensure the longevity? And the only way to do that is that farmers on the ground know about the results and are willing to embrace them. And also agricultural advisors know about them. Again, AI, just to reiterate, they're going to be used more and more and more. But the human side of this, participatory relational elements, are very important, especially when 40% of these projects are looking for this. The European Commission want it. And of course, AI can thread it through somewhat. It can do quite a good job. But if you don't have something to refer back to, like the checklist, you may be missing some elements. So looking ahead, this is hot off the shelf, as I mentioned at the very start. Everything that I spoke about, when you go onto this link and look at the Horizon Europe work programs, look at the multi-actor approach, hopefully the checklist can kind of help steer you in the right direction. We have developed a two-pager of this checklist. Very hard to distill all that down in 2 pages, but it does capture the message somewhat, and that's on the Premier website. Also in Zenodo, this is like a platform for hosting European Commission funded outputs. It does exist on that platform as well. So again, as I said, it's about getting it out to the different audiences. This isn't just about Horizon Europe Premier is in itself. So it's up to us to reach that larger audience. There is a LinkedIn page as well that I would encourage you to follow if you wish, just to keep up to date on various outputs of the project. We will hold a meeting in the middle of May. This is a already assigned group, but it just shows you that we're engaging with these actors across Europe. I'm not going to go into all this, time is tight, but just some of the other tools and materials. There's an online academy. These hands-on materials for good practices for multi-actor co-creation. Importantly, there's brokerage events that will help you maybe connect with potential partners. There's a seed funding aspect of the project that is gone out and has been selected, but it will provide support for the selected projects to maybe take that next step. And there's a lot of webinars. There was only one earlier in the week about it was about consortium builder, how to build a consortium. It was sort of a very advanced tool, but it's free to use for all of you. Essentially, it's it probably the checklist would be used alongside it, but building the consortium itself, it's there's kind of a statistical analysis built into it. It's quite advanced and very impressive, but you would need a few hours to get your head around it. But it does exist, and I think it would be worth those few hours, because these Horizon Europe projects are worth millions. So such a tool is helpful. And again, just check out the website. Ilvo, our partners in Belgium, are creating that. And whilst we're not involved, Galway haven't been involved in it, we'll help distribute it and communicate about it. So, when we're looking at this multi-actor inspiration, Rural Voices has been trying to achieve this from day one. And again, Maura and I and Louise, we've been drawing from our lessons learned from being so centrally involved in the last National Rural Network. We saw the value of this multi-actor approach through the EIP Agri, and also, and it's not mentioned enough, the value of LEADER. And the LEADER program had a vision in 1991 that I always try and say, whoever developed that, they were way ahead of their time, because you could take away that the data was published and apply it to 2025. They talk about co-innovation, networking. The 7 core principles of LEADER are actually the multi-actor approach. And I suppose I'm saying that because with the local action groups and their ethos and what they do, they're so well positioned to take the step, because that's what they do day in, day out. And if an Estonian lag can be involved, like in our project, there's no reason why in an Irish context they can't be. A lot of layers here that we're trying to take into account, and we have had a lot of presentations. This is just an example, and this one will be up on YouTube afterwards. So just the takeaways. Hopefully you can use this checklist early and throughout the proposal phase. Help build this diverse and balanced consortia aligned with that core quadruple helix model that I mentioned. This strategic management literature utilizes this as a good practice model for stakeholder engagement and inclusion. So if you can embed this co-creation within your proposals, it strengthens it. Prioritize stakeholder-driven dissemination exploitation for stronger societal impact, i.e. on the ground, makes a difference, return on investments. The project, when it's over, just doesn't stop. And a more authentic multi-actor engagement strengthens the eligibility, innovation, quality, and update of funding success. So I think the key point is let's just move beyond compliance. Oh, 40% of projects need to include the multi-actor approach. We have to do it. But the tools are there to draw from and to actually include it and to actually try and make a difference. There's real collaboration possible. And yeah, use AI, of course. It'll streamline, it'll save time, but such tools to just bring it back, the nuts and bolts to refer to are important also. And by bringing people together and to have them on the spot, essentially, by having them in a group together to thrash out ideas, it's still central. So yeah, so thanks for your attention, and we have a few minutes for questions, but not a lot. And Maura and Louise can also help me with questions. So
Great, Shane. Well done. Well done. A huge amount of material given there by Shane and a huge amount of work already gone into the project. So well done, Shane. We'll open it up. I'm not sure, are there people who are on with us today interested in engaging in Horizon projects that already know this whole idea on multi-actor and maybe becoming engaged in a project? I suppose we're leading a project ourselves, the Falara project in Galway. So when we were at this stage, we were out there looking for partners, and we partnered here in Ireland with Longford Women's Link, and we partnered with Teagasc. Now, Teagasc, I suppose, are like ourselves, they're already engaged in these projects, but Longford Women's Link had never been involved in a project before, and we were only too delighted to bring them on our journey with us. So I suppose listening to what Shane was saying, you know, I suppose we're wondering if you have any questions, first of all, for Shane, but then, you know, what is your thinking in relation to the different actors engaging in these projects? Is it a little bit daunting, or is it something that you definitely want to strive towards?